Friends, let's begin our crash course on the chapter on probability. As a first step, let's look at this English word called probability. So in everyday language, we use this word all the time. We say things like, it will probably rain today, India will win the World Cup this time, right? And when we say that, what do we really mean? Usually something like, I feel it is quite likely. So in daily conversations, the word probably really means a feeling of high likelihood. But that is not what probability means in mathematics. In mathematics, you can have a probability of 10%, and 10% does not feel probable at all. In fact, there is a 90% chance of the event not happening. So here's the point that I want to emphasize right at the beginning. Don't fool yourself into thinking you already understand this chapter just because you use the word probability in everyday life. In mathematics, words have very precise meanings, and that means we must define them very carefully. Probability is no exception, so let's do exactly that. Now, broadly speaking, there are two kinds of approaches to defining probability. The first approach assumes that there is something called truth out there in the world. According to this view, probability is a real number that exists in nature, and our observations and experiments simply help us discover that number. The second approach takes a very different view. It says, maybe there is no fixed truth that we can know. The truth may be unknowable. All we can do is observe the world and work with the best knowledge we currently have. And that knowledge can change with time. So let's make this concrete with a simple example, a coin toss. Under the first approach, the probability that a coin toss shows heads has a definite underlying truth value. If the coin is fair, that value is 0.5. This way of defining probability is called the Laplacian interpretation. According to Laplace, the probability of an event is a fraction defined by the number of favorable cases divided by the total number of possible cases. So for a coin, the total possible outcomes are head and tail. So the total count is 2. The number of favorable outcomes is just head. That count is 1. So the probability of head is 1 divided by 2. Notice what we did here. We did not actually toss the coin. We simply imagined the possible outcomes and counted them. So this is really a thought experiment, an ideal setting. And to be honest, this is the setting where mathematicians like to live most of the time. In fact, for this entire chapter, we will focus almost entirely on this one narrow definition of probability. But there is another truth-based interpretation called the frequentist approach. Here, the emphasis shifts slightly towards experiments. The idea is this. If I toss the coin many times, the fraction of times I get heads will slowly approach 1/2. For example, if I toss a coin 100 times, maybe I get 48 heads. So the probability is 48 divided by 100, which is 0.48. If I toss it 1000 times, maybe I get 501 heads. So the probability is 501 divided by 1000, so 0.501. So if I keep going 10,000 times, then 100,000 times, and so on, then the fraction of heads tends to settle closer and closer to 0.5. So the frequentist view says that probability is the value that this fraction approaches in the long run. But here is the interesting part. For the frequentist definition to become exact, the number of experiments must go to infinity. But who can perform infinite experiments? No one. That would require time, infinite time. So in the end, even the frequentist idea is still a conceptual thought experiment, although it is a bit closer to real data than the Laplacian one. And in fact, the frequentist answer matches the Laplacian answer only when the number of experiments tends to infinity. So both of these truth-based approaches live mostly in our heads. They are conceptual and idealized ways of thinking. Now let's turn to the other broad interpretation of probability. This is called the Bayesian interpretation. This approach is usually not covered in depth at school level, but it is still useful to understand the basic idea. The Bayesian view starts with a different philosophy. It does not assume there is a fixed truth waiting to be discovered. Or said differently, truth may depend on time, experimental conditions, it may depend on the observer. So the truth can vary from time to time, from person to person, and from experiment to experiment. In this approach, probability is simply a tool, a practical tool that helps us work with uncertainty. The value of probability is obtained by performing real experiments. In the lab, sometimes numerical experiments on a computer, and then adjusting for statistical noise. But we do not imagine that we have uncovered some eternal truth. The numbers can change, the conclusions can change, everything is open to revision. So let's go back to the coin example. In the Bayesian approach, we do not assume the coin is fair. Instead, we collect data. So suppose we toss the coin 1,000 times and observe that head appears 46% of the time. Then we simply say, based on the evidence we have so far, the probability of head is 0.46. Now suppose we perform another 1,000 tosses. Maybe the combined data suggests the probability is actually closer to 0.4. Why did it change? Maybe the coin is slightly defective. Maybe something about the experiment changed. But the key idea is we do not claim to know the reason, and that is perfectly okay. The Bayesian philosophy is comfortable with uncertainty and changing knowledge. The value may not be converging to a single number. It may be changing with time, place, and all that is okay. So after 2,000 experiments, we simply say, based on the latest and greatest evidence, the probability is 0.4 now. Now, before I let you go, one final note. Truth-based approach and Bayesian approach cannot really be compared directly. They come from completely different schools of thought. Sometimes they give the same answer, like in the case of a coin toss, but conceptually, they are apples and oranges.